Niger is a landlocked nation, about 3 times the size of California. It possesses a remarkably rich assortment of cultures, spectacular landscapes, and a broad diversity of wildlife. From the lush gallery forests along the western banks of the Niger River to the remote Aïr Mountains and the forbidding Sahara in the north, where the highest sand dunes in the world rise from the desert, Niger boasts a wide variety of expansive terrain. South of the desert, most of Niger is taken up by the Sahel, a vast dry savanna region with a 9-month hot and dry season, followed by a 3-month wet season. Africa's third longest river, the Niger, winds its way through the southwest corner of the country. The 4 major tribes are the Zarma around Niamey, the Hausa in the south, the pastoral Pul Fulani, and the nomadic Tuareg in the north. French is the official language and is spoken by most people in the major cities and by many in the rural areas. Over 80% of Nigerians are Muslim. Located on the banks of the Niger River, Niamey, the capital of Niger, has grown to be a lively and chaotic city of 750,000 inhabitants, where the sands of the Sahara drift up to the outskirts of town and the temperatures frequently exceed 110 degrees. The people of Niger live on the edge of the Sahara, the margins of human habitability on the planet. The desert has moved southward about 100 miles over the past 40 years. Lake Chad along the eastern border of Niger is only a small fraction of its original size. There has been a loss of 60% of forested areas in the past 25 years, and wildlife numbers are down 90% since the 1960s. Niger has an estimated population of 10 million people. Adult literacy rates are 15 to 20%. 1 in 4 children do not live beyond their 5th birthday, and life expectancy here is only 45 years. Still, at 3.5% per year, the population growth rate is one of the highest in the world. It has been at that level for a number of years and shows no sign of slowing. That means the population doubles every 20 years. Per capita GDP has been declining. Nigerians are poorer today than they were 4 decades ago. The status of women has been deeply ingrained for centuries. It is an equality and justice problem as well as an economic problem. Nearly half of all girls in Niger are married by the time they're 15 and have a baby by the time they're 16. The average Nigerian woman has 8 children. That is the highest fecundity rate in the world. A consequence of this is rapid population growth in spite of high infant mortality rates, and in spite of the diseases that kill many adults as well. In 2005, Niger experienced a famine that has led to severe malnourishment of large numbers of young children. Fortunately, emergency relief and development organizations have mobilized to help feed and care for many of those in need. These organizations and many others like it are doing their best to help the people of Niger who are victimized by the massive poverty problem here. However, it can take weeks or even months to deliver large quantities of food aid to remote areas.
As a humanitarian, we ask this question all the time: how come when we read or we hear of all the efforts that are made, that you have countries suffering and the problems which in a country like this where it doesn't seem to get support? I mean, I myself, I've worked many years in the international humanitarian field. For me, Nigeria also, I have to say, was never an area where I'd heard about, whatever, because there was all other crises. So I think it's a lack of interest from the donor community, a lack of, even though money has been put in, it's really not substantial. And this is why if you don't deal with some basic issues regarding the health services and stuff, that this is why when these factors like a problem with the harvest, that the country can fall very deep and very quickly into a real crisis point. It only comes to the attention when we have people, the cameras are rolling and pictures of babies dying, or it comes to the attention of the world or the public that there seems to be a reaction. I mean, again, I don't want to start or belittle all the efforts that's done by many NGOs and many organizations around the world, but I think it's true that everybody will agree that not enough is done for this continent. I think the region suffers on a seasonal basis. It has difficulties. If we look at Nigeria itself, it's now being classified as the poorest country in the world. I mean, in the UN Human Index. With the bad harvest last year, with the locust, I mean, infestation, coupled with now what was forecast to be poor rains, the rains had come late. I think it's a delicate balance. I mean, in this region, as it is quite poor, that small factors, the coping mechanisms of the population, and the markets and the food, let's say the whole food chain and food security is already on a very delicate balance. So small factors which influence it can turn things rather drastic and very quickly into a huge crisis here. I think this has been a little bit difficult because it's an ongoing problem over 2 years, so people were affected in different ways. If we look at, on one level, people who tried and used their means from last year because of the bad harvest, they've got into debt. So when this crisis happened now, this year, a lot of these people didn't have any means to actually get over, again, these usual seasonal crises that they have. Also, it has affected different populations in different ways. If we look at the pastoral communities, it seems because of access again to having proper access to animal feed and stuff, that a lot of animals have died. This again affects also then people's income, the money that they have. So again, it incapacitates them to actually cope with what maybe from in other contexts would seem maybe not such a huge problem because it's a seasonal thing, but I think here, as we talk of, it is the poorest country in the world. A small factor like this can actually throw the country very quickly, as many people live very much on the borderline and below the threshold of poverty.
Every year in Niger, there's a food crisis. It's kind of a function of how the markets work, of how people get all their grain at once. They have one rainy season, one shot to grow their millet or their beans, and then they grow it and they sell it right away, and then they go for the whole year on that whatever money they had, or maybe whatever grain that they saved. And what happens is, by the end of the year, by the time the rainy season starts again, there's less food. There's a shortage of food. This happens year after year. A lot of this is determined by market prices. You sell your millet in October, right about now when it's really cheap. You might sell more than what you would need to last for the whole year, just because you need the money at the time. And then you get to March, April, May, and you find that you have a lot. You need to buy more millet. And you have this money that you sold it for back in October, but you need to buy it at prices at 3 or 4, sometimes 5 times the amount that you sold it for.
Niger had a very difficult year 2005. As you know, the year 2005 was characterized by the food crisis. And this food crisis, in my opinion, had several underlying causes. I think one of the main causes is certainly the drought that occurred in the previous year, in 2004, which did not allow communities to properly cultivate it on their land. To me, the second reason is also, as you know, the locust invasion In the year 2004, the country experienced a pretty serious invasion of locusts, which destroyed considerable amount of crops. And the international world did not react quickly to these locusts. And I guess the damages were more considerable than more people thought. But I must say something, this year's crisis was a little different from previous crises, because this year's crisis was not just a food crisis. In my opinion, it was also a commodity price crisis. As opposed to previous food crises, this year you will notice that there was quite a striking increase in the price of commodities. Very much unlike our previous food crisis. Now, it's still not very clear exactly why the price increase was so significant, because what that did is exacerbate the food crisis which was already there. And of course, this year's crisis was also unique in the sense that it probably attracted more media attention than any other crisis.
These sorts of things are on such regional levels. My village had a great harvest last year. And so this rainy season, they were doing really, really good. But if you take a village 2 or 3 kilometers away, they might have had a completely different rainy season. So all these things are regional, all these things, you can't just apply this to the entire country of Niger, you know. But that's, I think, what the media did, is they kind of went and they went into these areas where they saw a lot of famine and saw a lot of people dying, took the pictures, wrote the stories, sent it back, and then this all blew up as a result. But really, I mean, MSF or Goal or Save the Children, they could be in Niger all the time, throughout the year, helping people, helping babies. And I think what they're doing is a great thing. It's just this sort of thing happened too late this year. I don't think I started seeing all the new trucks and the new organizations pop up here in the town until mid-August or so. And I had a field back when I was a volunteer, and I planted at the beginning of the rainy season, and it tends to be around the middle of August to early September when villagers around here start to get crops from their field, whether it be beans, whether it be the first heads of millet. That's not the case in all over, but from the middle of August to the middle of September is about the time when villagers start to get their some kind of use out of their fields, as opposed to just waiting for the crops to grow and watching them grow but not having any food at home. But what happened was this year was that all these aid organizations sort of showed up in August, and as soon as they came and they started doing distributions, they were kind of doing distributions at the same time as harvest, which is when everybody likes to sell their crops to get money. And this definitely to me seemed really late. I think the aid was much more needed back in July, even as far back as June. I mean, even as far back as May, there are people starting to starve in certain areas. Rainy season happens differently in every single region, and then a food crisis will be different as a result. So here in Zindera, you know, I'm sitting here in Zindera, I might be going out to my old village every once in a while and seeing how they're doing and seeing that they're doing great. But I know that in other parts of the country, it's a completely different story. And if you take volunteers up in Maradi, particularly in the Dakoro region, I mean, you hear horror stories. These are volunteers that see the sorts of things that gets reported in the newspapers, because this is actually their village that it's happening in. Not just Dakoro and the Maradi region, but you get places up in Tawa, Wallam, out further west of Niamey. There's spots all over the country. It was nightmarish, and I know a lot of volunteers had this sort of thing happening in their villages. So I mean, I might sit here and say, oh, you know, the aid was a little late, or oh, in Zindera it wasn't as bad as it was blown up to be in the media. But you know, in some places, other volunteers would probably tell you, no, this is just as bad as what you saw in the media. It could be even worse than what you saw.
Oui, bon, vous savez, pour parler de la famine ou crise alimentaire, on peut dire que c'est un phénomène déjà qui existait, parce que y a une mauvaise répartition des pluies dans le pays, ce qui est un cas général, ce qui se répète presque toutes les années. Il y a des zones qui sont déficitaires, tandis que d'autres sont excédentaires en matière de pluie. Donc cet état de fait existe déjà. Ce n'est pas un fait nouveau, mais il s'est aggravé par rapport donc à la situation de l'année dernière. Comme il n'y avait pas eu beaucoup de pluie l'année 2004 passée, la saison 2004 a été mauvaise, donc ajouté au déficit précédent. Donc cela a fait que c'est devenu une situation un peu particulière. Mais sinon, de tout temps, il y avait eu ces situations de mi-crise alimentaire, c'est-à-dire que les gens n'avaient pas suffisamment de nourriture dans d'autres zones, tandis que dans d'autres, il y en a. Donc c'était existant. Mais avec les pluies qui n'ont pas été assez bonnes l'année dernière, ça s'est aggravé. Voilà pourquoi je crois que c'est venu comme ça. Est-ce que s'il y a beaucoup de nourriture, le prix va diminuer? Effectivement, le prix va diminuer. C'est une bonne chose que le prix diminue parce que, comme je vous l'ai dit, les gens n'ont pas beaucoup de travail, ils font l'artisanat, ils font des petits travaux qui ne leur donnent pas assez d'argent pour se nourrir. Et parfois, les gens ont aussi beaucoup de familles, beaucoup de charges. Ici, vous savez, nous avons une forte natalité ici.
Yeah, if food aid comes in a country later than expected, it can cause a problem. Of course, it can cause a disruption in the market price of that particular commodity. We have not noticed that issue particularly occurring in Niger, especially this year, because we feel that the timing was somewhat okay for the arrival of the commodities, but it can be a problem. You have to time very well when you bring in food aid in the country. Otherwise, instead of helping, you may be more of a disincentive, not only for the sellers, but also for the producers. So it's very important to time your food aid very, very well. But I must say that we didn't feel that was an issue in Nigeria this year. Our program brings in food, not only for monetization, but also for free distribution. And what we do is we time the arrival of our commodities very well to ensure that, for example, free food for distribution will arrive during what is called here the hunger season, which is somewhere around March, April, May, right when the farmers are out there planting on their farms. And to make sure that by the time they begin to harvest, the free food is all being used up. And that helps us to ensure that market prices are not disrupted. Again, this is where your initial study comes in really, really handy. If your initial study is done well, you know exactly when to bring in the commodities, how much of that commodity to bring in. You should be a positive force, not a disincentive to local production or a factor to disrupt prices. In our case, for example, we determined that during the hunger season around April, there's a strong need for certain staples, for example. So we try to time the arrival of our shipment around that time, around April, and around November and December, for example, which is holiday season, where you have a much bigger demand for that commodity. And what we have been bringing in the country represent a very, very, very small percentage actually of the total amount needed in the country. For example, the rice that we bring in Niger is less than 2% of what is actually needed. So it helps certainly in stabilizing the market and reducing the prices. It doesn't flood the market, and certainly it does not discourage farmers who farm that same crop in doing so. For example, in the year 2005, at the very beginning of the food crisis, we had a shipment in April to arrive in April. We had a shipment of rice and oil, vegetable oil, to arrive in April. And once that shipment arrived in the country, we noticed a slight decrease of that particular commodity in the local market. So that helped the communities because that helped to stabilize the price and even bring down the prices at the benefit of the consumers. So it can be very, very helpful in a food crisis situation. But again, the sales from that transaction is also used to implement development activities in the country.
Humanitarian organizations have a long experience working in crisis and have learned many lessons from mistakes of the past. Markets are usually monitored. It's also it's an issue of cost effectiveness. If food is available within or close to regions that are in crisis, then of course it makes a whole lot of sense to purchase within the regions, and it's an effective way of using donors' money and public's money who initially go directly to support the actual beneficiaries. It's a delicate balance sometimes, because of course if we look what has happened in the Sahel, the whole region is affected, from Burkina Faso, Mali, the whole food market chain has been a bit disrupted, so it has been a little bit difficult to keep a sort of real balance in the large number of tonnage that was required to actually run this operation throughout the whole country, if we speak specifically of Niger. But also the government in Niger also had some stocks, and it was an issue of the international community supporting them because of the lack of real infrastructure to be able to deliver this food in a timely fashion while the crisis was ongoing. We distributed basically three commodities, some beans, maize and oil. And a second round of distributions which really focused on the tablet area, again it being categorized as one of the priority areas. We actually distributed rice during the second round, again oil and beans. The food comes from around the region. I understood parts of it, I mean, through a pipeline shipped by the World Food Programme, from some food from Nigeria, some food from Cote d'Ivoire, from different regions, which has been sort of purchased locally within the region, which is sort of this complex humanitarian environment where trying to sort of put money back within the local economies. Of course, also not trying to destroy the different markets. We recruited during the distribution process volunteers from the actual villages, and we used also the local traditional structures, like the chiefs of villages, who, based on the beneficiary list and the registration that we've done, they were a sort of verification of actual numbers of families, because the distribution was done on per family, and a ration was handed out according to sizes of families. So involving local structures, it sort of was a verification process.
C'est la préparation du prémix, c'est-à-dire la ration pour les enfants malnutris. Il s'agit de l'unimix et de l'huile mélangée. On mélange un sac de 25 kg à 2,5 litres d'huile. Le tout malaxé donne une ration pour les enfants. Cette ration est servie à l'enfant chaque jour en bouillie, préparée avec de l'eau chaude. Et elle assure une croissance et une progression rapide de l'enfant. Donc c'est des rations de 3,3 kg qu'on donne à chaque enfant pour 15 jours. Et puis donc pour d'abord on fait c'est-à-dire le recensement des enfants. On voit d'abord quels sont les enfants malnutris, on fait la pesée, le poids, la taille de l'enfant pour savoir s'il est malnutri ou pas. Si les malnutris, il est inclus dans notre programme. Il reçoit alors la ration Unimix et la ration pour la famille, la ration de support. S'il a d'autres complications, s'il est malade, nous donnons des médicaments. S'il a de la diarrhée, de la fièvre ou d'autres complications, nous donnons des produits contre ces maladies. Et nous faisons aussi le déparasitage systématique de l'enfant dès qu'il est malnutri, qui permet aussi à l'enfant de récupérer. Donc les malnutris sévères sans complications. Pour les compliquer, on les envoie au CRENI de l'hôpital.
At the CRENI, the children are actually brought by different organizations such as Save the Children, CARE, GOAL and others. And so they come here in buses or in minibuses and trucks. They're offloaded. Then they come into the administration part. where we weigh them, we check how tall they are, we measure the Z score. There is also if the child has edemas, because we are a CRENI, which is intensive severely malnourished children. We take children that have edema plus plus or plus plus plus, which means they have to have edemas not just on the feet but also legs and face and overall. On top of that, they're often sick as well. They're often ill, they have malaria, anemia, dehydration. So there's lots of different components which are linked to the malnutrition as well. Eventually they get the material they need to stay for at least 2 to 3 weeks. The doctor at the admission will decide if the child has to go straight into the intensive care unit or into phase 1. If the child is severely ill or severely malnourished and needs really close-up surveillance, it will go into the ICU and stay there for a few days until it's good enough to be placed into the phase 1. Once they are starting to put on weight, after a few days they're actually being put into phase 2, where they start with the plumpy nut as well, and that's where they really are having their fatting up rations. We do treat all the diseases that they have, like malaria, respiratory infections. A lot of children have respiratory infections. We treat the mothers as well, because there's no point treating a child and the mother is ill. Anything that's bigger, that is chronical, we are not taking in charge at the moment. It's a very difficult topic because we can't take them in charge. A lot of organizations are helpless towards that as well. So often there's not much else we can do than just send them home, and they finally die in their villages. I think what is the most obvious is that the education is lacking. And I think everything comes with education, so I don't know how much. I've got a very high percentage of illiterate people in Niger, which is definitely having an influence on the overall situation. Access to healthcare is very poor, it's extremely poor. People can't afford to go. So all this is also linked to what we are seeing today.
The Red Cross has been supporting some 56 supplementary feeding centres where some 30 to 40,000 children were assisted through who were severely malnourished. What we saw in some of these cases, a lot of the children, it wasn't because of lack of food, it was because of disease or other factors. If we look at one health issue that is endemic here is malaria. It's amazing if we look in this century that a large part of the population is dying from such a disease, which we've been able to have an impact or control in other parts of the world. The International Federation of the Red Cross is going to start with the support of the Ministry of Health and through its partner the Niger Red Cross in December a sort of campaign against malaria, where actually it's quite an ambitious program where some 2 million mosquito nets will be distributed to the population. Yes, I mean it's very good to assist during a crisis with food aid and bring in the necessary products, but I think the whole continuum to a development level is very important. It's rather better giving someone the means. I mean, as the old proverb, rather than give them a fish, give them a fishing rod and then they can fish themselves. So I think that's very much goes for here, that it's better to give people the means.
What we do in Peace Corps is actually just put a volunteer in the village, make him or her learn the local language, and then that way the volunteer can sort of listen to the villagers, can talk with the villagers, get to know them better, and sort of find really what the village thinks are its needs, or how the village thinks, what the village thinks it needs to do to progress, to develop. Projects the volunteers like to do or sort of forced to do can't require a lot of money. And I know a lot of volunteers just fund their projects out of their own pocket. And why that's useful is that it can, if the projects are successful and they're funded with a small amount of money, then these are projects that everyday people in Niger could also maybe start to do themselves. So it's a great way to show Nigerians at a local level, at a grassroots level, how to help themselves, as opposed to coming in with trucks and equipment and building schools, building wells, which is great and useful, but it's a different approach than what other organizations do.
We like to work more in behavioral change related activities, teach mothers to better prepare their food, to better feed their children, to make a better selection of food for their children. But we also like to change behaviors. One particular activity that we do, for example, is promote exclusive breastfeeding, which has shown to be a very, very key element in ensuring the health of babies. What can be tragic is when food crises come as a surprise to communities. If we have ways of teaching communities to foresee crises, to manage them, to put in place systems to deal with crises when they arrive, I think they will be able to manage crises a lot better. I believe cereal banks can be a very good alternative, very good solution to mitigate food crises, because first of all, it allows communities to access food when they need it the most. And second of all, cereal banks are very useful in helping the market prices to remain stable. What happens here is during the harvest season, everyone rushes into the market to sell their product, causing the price of that particular product to drop considerably. And as a result of that, farmers are not able to make the type of money that they should be making in the crops that they produce. They can bring their product to a cereal bank where their product can be stored. They can get some cash in return for that. They can take care of their debts and continue with their daily living. And when that product becomes rare again in the market, they can return to that same cereal bank and purchase that commodity at a reasonable price.
Basically, a grain bank works in that the village has a building that it designates as a bank for grain. They will give donations, their own, what's called their own contributions to the grain bank before it gets started. So we'll say like each member gives 5 kilograms of millet or 10 kilograms of millet, and then a certain amount of money. What that does is it allows villagers to always have a supply of grain, and they'll usually sell grain when it gets expensive. So they'll have the grain and they'll sell it from the bank when it gets expensive, but buy it at times when it's inexpensive. So right now during harvest, if there's a certain amount of money that they have, they'll buy a lot of grain, hold it in the bank, keep it in the bank until the rainy season comes when grain gets short, and sell it when the prices are higher at that time. And that way the grain, and if they keep doing this year after year, even if they start with a small initial stock of grain, slowly and slowly it'll keep on profiting until some of these grain banks, even small villagers, turn huge profits.
About the cereal bank, food bank, etc. We think that it's a good idea. Okay, it's a good idea, but this population must have training how to make a good management of this kind of bank. We ask to the community that we prefer that the woman do the management of this activities, because here I was told, and I think so. I think that's true. Women are best manager in this kind of shows in the community than men.
The president of the grain bank was speaking, and he brought up the importance of having women in the village cooperatives. A lot of times what will happen is a village might make a cooperative, and it might tends to just be men, because those are, in this society, that's the more dominant gender. And so they'll form a society, whether it be a grain society, fertilizer cooperative, gardening, etc., it'll usually be men. But what development organizations have been forcing is that if they're going to get funding from outside, there must be women involved in these cooperatives. And so if, let's say, Peace Corps wants to start a cooperative and donate an initial amount of money to this, or Aquadev or ASAPI, any one of these development organizations always stress that there must be women members of the groups, not just for practical reasons that women might run things better, women might be more honest than men, etc., but just to sort of encourage women's involvement in these sorts of things. And because in the philosophy of a lot of development organizations, the fact that women are not on an equal level in society as men is one of the reasons that Niger is so impoverished. Organizations like Peace Corps and Aquadev, they can't just come into a village and say you must have women join your cooperatives without giving them a reason. And usually what we say is things that villagers already know, and it's just kind of reminding them of what the importance of women are in their societies and in the family and that sort of thing. One of the biggest is that the women are always at home and always in the village, and basically are the best people with the memory about what would happen in, let's say, a grain bank, about people who are watching, who are there, like seeing whether thieves or sort of bad practices, corruption, and that sort of thing is going on in the bank. And women are basically the best watchdogs for this because they're always in the village. They don't leave and come back. They don't travel to Nigeria to look for work and that sort of thing. What happens a lot, and what has happened in this particular village, and in lots of other villages that I know of, is that grain banks don't really get off the ground, usually because of some kind of dubious behavior going on with the bank members. And so he was really stressing that we have this money, we've got it, let's take it and use it properly, and let's not let anything happen again in this particular village like it had happened in the past, and also what they know has happened in other places. So, and it's sort of like I've been mentioning a few of these other organizations' goals, like ASAPI and Aquadev and Peace Corps, all of whom have similar development principles, is that development just doesn't happen all at once. And you can't just throw, you can throw a lot of money at something and just hope that it goes. But really the best way to do it is to start small, to start from the bottom, and then sort of let it grow on its own and without outside influence in it, but letting the people, teach the people how to do it, teach them the skills to like run a grain bank, for instance, and then let them continue it for year after year without the need of some kind of organization coming in and reteaching them or continually inserting some kind of capital. So this guy was pretty smart, I think, in that he understands this. He's seen grain banks fail in the past, and so he's really saying, be careful with this, let's be honest, and let's let this thing get off the ground. And it won't be today or tomorrow when we start seeing the results, but we will start seeing results later down the road. I lived in a village out in the Gidimini region for 2 years, and we had a grain bank there, which wasn't started by Peace Corps, which was started by a different organization about 10 years ago. And that grain bank has been operating for 10 years. They've had problems, but how they've dealt with the problems basically is replacing the president of the grain bank, replacing the secretary, and so the village has through training, whoever installed this grain bank in the village did trainings, told the villagers how to keep the books, how to measure, how to sell, how to buy, and also how to. The most importantly is to get rid of the management if it's not working properly. And I think in my village they've had 2 or 3 changes, not only with the president and the vice president, but also in some of the they have auditors as well that keep track of things. And so, yeah, it's been going on for 10 years. I can't see it failing in the next 10 years. So, and like I say, that's what started 10 years ago. And I think the initial deposit in that grain bank was about 80 sacks of millet, but if you go to there now, they're thinking about building an entire new magazine, a new storage building, because they have so much millet now and getting so much profits that they need more space to hold it all.
Another key element I think in Niger that the country needs is also increasing the cultivable land. Only 15% of the land in Niger is arable. Out of the 15%, only 3% is actually being cultivated on. As you can see, the area being cultivated on is very, very small. Only 3% of that 15% is actually being used. So we feel that if we can increase the cultivated land, that will ultimately help also increase the production. And one way of doing that is not only work with the communities to start using more land, but also to rehabilitate some of the land that is being degraded on a daily basis.
If you go out into the bush, any place where you find some kind of depression, like an oasis type, or a lake or something like that, you'll find villagers gardening. Salad and cassava, carrots, tomatoes, basic produce that you can find in Niger. And they're trying to introduce several species, not just from different varieties in Niger, but from abroad as well. Just focusing on drought-resistant trees and that sort of thing. And also, one of the biggest things that villagers do anyway is grafting mango trees. And typically if you graft two different varieties of mango trees, or two different trees, the fruit that you get from that grafting is 2 or 3 times as big as it normally would. So that's the idea that they're doing with several different varieties of fruit trees. Environment volunteers as well, even though their main goal is to stop the Sahara Desert from engulfing all of Niger, they also work under this food security program, because if the less desertification, the more farmland and the more prosperous and the more the farms will be, the more grain and whatnot that you can get out of them.
Another thing that can be done to better prepare communities is to work in increasing the literacy level of the communities, because Niger as a country has the highest illiteracy level in the world. Almost 7 people out of 10 cannot read and write in Niger. And this makes it even more difficult in training these communities in some of those techniques to enable them to basically mitigate crisis.
My main work is in education. It's a large part of our mission here. We build schools for the young pupils. It is important for us that we had in our school as much girls than boys, because here the rate of scholarization of the girls is very, very low comparative of the boys.
I know in Zinder, a lot of the volunteers here have been started programs to teach English to teachers as well as to students, so that the teachers, and actually training people to become teachers in English. And also education volunteers promote girls' education. It's a huge part of the education of the Peace Corps' education sector, is to promote young girls' education. If you go into a school in the bush, you won't see near the number of young girls as you do see boys. So getting parents educated about the importance of girls' education.
It is important for us to engage all the people of the community. It must be the school of the village, not a school coming from Niamey and the government to put the school in the village. But we think it is important that the people of the village ask for a school. If they ask for a school, the scholarization of their children will be more important, much more important.
Si quelque chose qu'on pourrait faire vraiment pour changer cet état de fait, c'est d'abord, je pense, à mon niveau, trouver de l'emploi pour les jeunes. Parce que la population nigérienne est tellement jeune et elle est vraiment une population qui a cet avantage d'avoir cette population jeune qui est là et qui a besoin de travail, parce qu'il faut, la base de tout développement, c'est le travail. Il faut que ces gens-là aient accès à un emploi. Il faut que ces jeunes-là aient quand même la solution à leurs problèmes pour subvenir aux problèmes de la vie quotidienne, aux problèmes de leur famille. Moi, je pense aussi à des actions de développement c'est-à-dire des actions de développement plus avancées, c'est-à-dire des actions qui feraient en sorte que les gens sortent de leur misère, de leur pauvreté. Pas des petites actions qui ne mènent à rien, mais des actions vraiment qui sont bien réfléchies, des actions bien financées, si on peut le dire, pour vraiment faire progresser les choses. Pourquoi pas la création des entreprises et la création de débouchés, la création de l'emploi. Et ça sera vraiment quelque chose qui sera bénéfique pour cette population.
Vraiment, la structure est en train d'appuyer les micro-entrepreneurs à pouvoir davantage renforcer leurs revenus pour essayer de développer des activités génératrices de revenus afin de renforcer leurs revenus. Et on a vu que plus les clients ils ont du crédit, plus ils augmentent leur chiffre d'affaires et donc partant de cela aussi leurs activités s'agrandissent et on voit qu'à la fin en fait ils remboursent non seulement le crédit avec intérêt, mais dans la mesure où c'est des fonds quand même assez consistants qu'on leur donne à crédit, je pense qu'ils essaient aussi d'améliorer leurs conditions de vie ainsi que les conditions de vie des membres de leur famille. Et je ne le dirai pas assez, et chacun le sait, le Niger est encore classé dernier par rapport à la position de tous les pays dans le monde. Et je pense qu'une des forces de Asusu, c'est que ça va certainement aider les gens à sortir de la misère dans laquelle ils se trouvent. Et ça, on le fait à travers justement des crédits directs. Parce que la nouveauté aussi, c'est qu'avant, les gens étaient obligés d'épargner pour avoir accès au crédit. Or, quand on prend le contexte national, on sait que les gens sont pauvres. Et dire que pour les gens qui sont pauvres, qui cherchent à manger, on est obligé de faire de l'épargne afin d'avoir du crédit, ça va être difficile dans notre contexte. Mais toujours est-il que la plupart, en fait, à plus de 90%, les clients de Asusu Tigaba sont des femmes. Pourquoi? Parce que la stratégie ou la philosophie même de Asusu Tigaba, c'est de toucher les populations ou les franges les plus vulnérables. Et au Niger, on le sait bien, la femme occupe quand même une position.
We are testing pilot projects. If you look in the Tanout region, we have a cash distribution program, which, I mean, there are many questions being asked about handing out cash. The issue is that it's a test to see, give people the responsibility, because this is, if we look at what is needed, the biggest issue is that, yes, the people lack means and cash to carry out their own activities or decide for themselves how they would choose to use this commodity. Food aid, yes, is very important, but only on an onset of a crisis. I think the Red Cross is also going to explore looking at, because of course maybe support mechanisms or increasing and helping the coping mechanisms of individuals and communities, and maybe trying to explore different ways to do that rather than as we seem to always go back to within the humanitarian community is through handouts. I mean, again, these large-scale food operations. I think what we're trying to do as a follow-on from dealing with the emergency phase of crisis is looking at more the livelihood aspects and looking at the coping mechanisms of the population here, because as we say, by providing people with means, providing farmers with tools, with seeds, providing the pastoralists with maybe restocking their herds or giving them means to, because of their indebtedness, that they can buy animal fodder. I mean, this is probably a more dignified way of assisting the population, letting them take control of their own destiny rather than us dictating from a top-down approach, giving what we decide usually from the humanitarian community is the best support.
One way to help improve Niger's economy is through tourism. North of Agadez, the Ayer Mountains and the Tenere Desert provide breathtaking vistas. In Zinder, time-honored Muslim traditions are displayed at the end of Ramadan. And wildlife areas along the Niger River offer unique experiences for adventurous travelers. On the banks of the Niger, across from the city, large pirogues wait to transport people and goods down the river. Every evening, scores of large bats take to the air above the river. Just 50 miles east of Niamey live the last herd of wild giraffes in West Africa. A precarious but growing population of 170 giraffes live in the area around the village of Kure. National Park W is one of the last great strongholds for West African wildlife. Located 3 hours south of Niamey on the western bank of the Niger River, few places in West Africa can compete with the diversity of wildlife found here. Poaching, illegal grazing, and uncontrolled fires are the main threats to the park's wildlife.
Le tourisme c'est une bonne affaire, c'est une bonne chose parce que de toute façon ça crée des partenariats, ça crée des liens. Les gens qui viennent d'ailleurs pour voir ce que vous faites ici, ils repartent avec certainement des idées en tête, ils repartent avec des souvenirs. Et ils sont peut-être aussi une ressource importante à ne pas négliger. D'ailleurs, la majorité des gens ici, une grande partie des gens de la population d'ici, d'Agadez, profitent de ce tourisme. Je pense qu'il faudrait vraiment améliorer cet aspect tourisme par des relations c'est-à-dire plus durables, qui ne se limitent pas seulement à la visite sur le terrain, regarder le désert, le Ténéré, voir l'aspect, la beauté des choses, mais que ça soit plus approfondi, que ça soit un tourisme enrichissant, un tourisme avec lequel on peut créer des liens de partenariat avec les gens, avec lequel on peut créer des échanges qui seront aussi une source de développement pour ces populations qui en fait ne serviraient pas seulement au folklore, quoi. Il ne suffit pas seulement de venir regarder les Touaregs, regarder la campagne, la nature. Non, il faut penser à des actions qui peuvent être faites par ces touristes une fois rentrés dans leur pays d'origine pour qu'ils puissent parler réellement des problèmes qu'ils ont vus et des réalités qu'ils ont vues afin d'apporter des solutions pour améliorer vraiment aussi ce qu'ils ont vu et les réalités qu'ils ont connues lors de leur passage. Je pense que le tourisme est une bonne chose et que nous l'encourageons vivement.
There's a dual economy. I mean, there's the one built around during the season of the tourists. There's infrastructure built around that. I think it's like in many issues, and this could apply in many parts of the world, it's an issue of distribution of the wealth. There is a focus here during a certain time of the year where people, do have jobs or access to, a whole tourist service industry. But I think that's not representative of the whole country. I think one has to be rather realistic of that, and I think many tourists may come to Agadez, travel through the desert, and not have an actual picture of what the rest of Nigeria looks like, and actually probably have a false picture because, of course, their needs are catered on comfortable hotels, travel in comfortable vehicles, seeing the desert, when around them they don't have to go very far. I mean, in communes just around Agadez itself, they can see people living in very difficult conditions, or they travel a little bit further, they can see people affected by the situation. But of course, that's not really a selling point for many tourist agencies, so I'm not sure that many of the people will get that opportunity.
The 1990s were a lost decade for development in Niger because of political instability and military coups, which caused many of the donor organizations to withdraw. Since the election of 1999, the government has been stable, democratic, and decent. Hopefully this will continue. There is some corruption, but it is a much lesser problem than is the general case in Africa and much of the rest of the developing world. A great deal of Niger's foreign debt has been forgiven, but the problems are so massive that they are caught in a poverty trap, and it will take a long time and a lot of help for them to get out of it.
L'espoir pour le Niger, je vous ai dit, moi je pense toujours que c'est cette population jeune qui attend vraiment qui attend ce déclic, qui attend ce travail, qui attend ce moment fort, quoi. Donc on doit profiter aujourd'hui de cette assistance de la communauté internationale parce que la communauté a quand même un œil aujourd'hui sur notre pays face à la situation. On doit profiter donc de ce regard de la communauté internationale pour pouvoir obtenir ce qu'on n'a pas eu depuis longtemps, c'est-à-dire cette assistance qui ferait que notre population, qui est en fait jeune, ait du travail à sa portée pour que nos conditions de santé soient améliorées, pour que nos conditions d'élevage et d'agriculture soient améliorées. Notre espoir vraiment, c'est la communauté internationale qui nous observe en ce moment.
There are very, very capable people. They're very willing. I mean, I'm amazed in a country which is supposed to be the poorest, the level of criminality is very low. Having worked in many difficult parts of the world where, you know, who are less poor than the region here, I'm quite surprised. But when you go and you meet the people, the friendliness, even though they're in their crisis, I think this is a huge asset for this country for the future. I mean, its people are its asset, and their openness and friendliness. So back to the question regarding the tourism, I mean, that is definitely a good point if something is moved on, or if the tourist industry is developed. One of the key assets for that to function will be the actual people. They're so friendly, even in crisis. As I said, this operation has been quite an ambitious one within the short space of time that we've done, but it's only been possible through our local counterparts. And as I say, the technical expertise, this is probably through a long process of development aid that has gone in. The experts do exist, but it's a question of means and follow-up and sustainability. I mean, basic issues which affects us all, whether you're from the West or you're from Africa. If you don't get your salary, I mean, you're not going to be motivated, you won't work. If you don't have the means to carry out your job, I mean, it would be the exact same for us in the West. You won't function very well. So I think there's those infrastructural issues that are around. But what I've seen in 2 months, I have to say I'm quite impressed, and I've been in many parts of the world and many crises. This has been what I would consider a very successful operation because of the on many levels. I mean, from authorities down to across the board to community leaders. I mean, we've had great support, and there have been, yes, issues and problems, but together we've been able to solve them, which for me is a very positive aspect and will be a positive memory when I leave this context to move to another crisis around the world.
Scientists have detected what they think is a halting and maybe even a reversal of the desertification that has been going on for the last 5 or 6 decades. Satellite images suggest that the Sahara has stopped its steady southward creep and is at least not going any further south, maybe even going back north.
There are definitely signs of hopes for Niger in terms of development and in terms of reducing the poverty level. I must say I have been here personally for 3 or 4 years, and I have seen a big difference already. I think the first sign is first of all the level of democracy in the country. Niger is a wonderful example of democracy in Africa, and I believe democracy can really bring forth economic development. That's a big plus, and also, as I said, a lot is being done now to address poverty and to address development issues. I think the government is doing a wonderful job, first of all, in clarifying what are the priorities for the country. The country now has an official document underlying the priorities for the countries, but also ways to deal with these issues. now NGOs and development organizations are needed to come in and see what they can contribute towards those different strategies that the country has already laid out. So there's definitely hope for Niger, and now they're doing a wonderful job attracting more tourists, for example. As you know, they're trying to find other ways of bringing in investment, cash, fresh cash into the country. So I believe there's hope. I believe there's hope for the country. I tend to be optimistic. I'm an optimistic person, but I've seen Niger 5 years ago, and I've seen Niger today, and I can say there's hope.